Hello, everyone, and welcome to Debating Metal, the podcast where we talk about all things hard rock and metal. This week, we're going to talk to you about albums from bands you haven't heard, but should.
There's some bands that unfortunately fly a bit under the radar and deserve a bit more attention than they're getting or got while they were still together. Today, we're going to talk about some of those bands' best albums and bring them to your attention.
But first, the formalities. If you enjoy the show and want to hear more, click the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform and get the show on your phone, your tablet, your PC, or whichever device you like every week or thereabouts.
We also want to interact with you guys and read your opinions, so if you like what we have to say or just want to rip us a new one, send us an email to debatingmetal@gmail.com or DM us on our Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. We're also now on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and ring that YouTube bell to be alerted each week when we drop a new episode. All right, so this week I think we're going to forego Rusty Metal since it kind of clashes with our main topic this week. So I'm just going to go over briefly my freshly forged pick, which is Torn Arteries by Carcass. I've never been the biggest Carcass fan, but I kind of got into them around the time that they released Heartwork. I liked some of the stuff they'd done since and before, but it just wasn't like one of my top bands. But I definitely wanted to give this a listen. I had heard Kelly's Meat Emporium off of this. All the tracks have like these really interesting names, so I thought it was really interesting. But I heard a couple of tracks just on Google, not Google Music, YouTube Music, just kind of what in mixes that were playing, and I was like, man, this is not bad. So I went ahead and checked out the whole album. A couple of the standout tracks that I heard were Under the Scalpel Blade. I really like that one. I believe that was the first single they released. In God We Trust, I think, is my favorite off of the album. It wasn't a single, but I think it's a really good track. It's the same guys that have been going this whole time, Jeffrey Walker and Bill Steer. The only thing that I kind of found that I didn't quite like was I felt like the drums maybe were a little bit too far back in the mix. Like they weren't very powerful, and I thought that was kind of a missed opportunity because overall the tracks are really good. I think the only track that really kind of pushed the drums a little bit more forward and utilized them well was In God We Trust, and maybe that's kind of why that track stood out to me so much. But definitely check out this new album by Carcass. It's kind of in the same vein of stuff they've done before. It's not quite what they were doing, with Heartwork, but the band's still doing well, and it's a good album.
Is that the album that had that funny album cover that you and I were talking about? Did it just recently came out, or like a couple months ago or so?
It just came out. The singles had been released all the way from 2019, because this album was supposed to come out in 2020, but because of the pandemic, it got delayed. So the first single came out in 2019 in December, and then they released 3 more starting in June, August, and September. So it just came out a few days before we're recording this, and it has that album cover that's like a heart that's made out of peppers, and
that's the one I was thinking about. Yeah, because I remember it was a kind of weird album cover.
Well, yeah. I mean, it fits right in the vein of all of their album covers. If you go back and look, like Surgical Steel is like a circle made out of like surgical tools.
Yeah, I thought that was the band we were talking about. That was the album cover with the heart and made out of peppers.
Mm-hmm. Really cool art. Interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's very cool. All right, so this week we're talking about bands that you haven't heard of, or you haven't heard in a while, or you don't know who the hell they are, and they've got some pretty good albums that we think you should be listening to. So this is almost like an episode of our segment we used to do many, many months ago called "What Should You Be Listening To?" And this is like a big blown up version of that. And we're gonna pick 3 albums each for this episode. And I think you should go first since this was your idea.
Okay. So the first band that I picked is one called Rain Time. They are an Italian band. They're from Pordenone, Italy. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but forgive me if I failed. I picked their second album, Flies and Lies. So they were originally a progressive power metal band, and they had some kind of like death metal sound to them. But the first album was definitely more progressive, whereas this is more of a melodic death metal sound. They have a really similar sound to Soilwork or In Flames, and the kind of big difference is they kind of picked up on that sound that they had in the 2000s. So we've in previous episodes we had mentioned In Flames. We talked about two of their albums prior to the year 2000, and this is kind of more of their sound after 2000. And I guess as time has gone on, I've kind of lightened up a little bit more on that sound because, I think it's one of those things like you realize that bands evolve and change. And so like this band kind of picking up on that sound, it is a bit different. It is more progressive as like instrumentation. So it's not quite the same, but I think if you're a fan of those bands that I mentioned, or at least of the Gothenburg sound from that time period, you'll definitely enjoy this. The singer is named Claudio Coassin. He has really excellent clean vocals, and I listened to both albums. So I listened to the first album and the second, and that's unfortunately all they ever released. But his death metal vocals really improved from the first to the second album. And they're much more understandable. I would say like you can really make out all of his lyrics, which is I think something that really puts off some fans of the genre, where they're just not as into the vocals if they can't understand what they're saying. I think you've kind of mentioned that in the past.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is when it comes to that. Sometimes it's weird for me because sometimes like the music really grabs me, and I don't really pay attention to the lyrics. And then there's other times where the vocals just are so disturbing to me, or just so annoying that I get turned off completely. So it's almost like an either or type of thing for me.
Gotcha. So I think you would probably enjoy this, being that I would say 80% of the vocals are clean vocals, and then it's mixed in with the growls. So it's a little bit more leaning towards the side of clean vocals. This feels to me, like I said, it sounds like a lot like In Flames. It almost sounds to me more of what I thought In Flames would have evolved into in the early 2000s, rather than what the direction they went. So if that makes sense to you, then that's pretty cool. The only outlier that I really don't like on this album, there's one track, and it's not that I don't like the track itself, I just feel like the placement is terrible. They did a cover of Beat It by Michael Jackson. And it's track 8 on an 11-track album. So
track 8.
Yeah. It's so randomly slotted in there. It does not make sense with the vibe of the album, and it just feels like it should be a bonus track at the end. I don't know why it's there. It's like, they're an Italian band. I don't know how popular that release was there. I know they're a pretty big band in the scene as far as like people feel like they're an underrated band, but I don't know the effect that maybe that track had in other countries where people said like this is awesome or something. But when I listen to it and I'm listening to the album as a whole, all it does is disrupt the flow. So if that had been stuck at the end, it just would have made a lot more sense. But
yeah, you could just shut it off.
I skip it every time. I'll be honest, I haven't listened to this album in a few years, but I've had it probably about a year after it came out, and it just, That's one track I always skipped. I remember in the car it was just like skip. so
I have songs like that too.
Yeah. I just feel like this is one of those bands that was kind of criminally overlooked, and then by the time that maybe they could have taken off and people really started hearing what they were playing, because it did cross over, to other countries. For an Italian band, that's pretty cool, like to be able to kind of get that crossover appeal, but it was too late. So they had already broken up in around 2010, 2011, and they really kind of started getting that more, appeal, like wide stream appeal, like in 2012, 2013. So it's too little, too late. So the highlights on the album, the first track, Flies and Lies, it's really cool. Rolling Chances, Tears of Sorrow. And for me, the biggest one, like the one I liked the most, was Rolling Chances. I thought that was really nice, like fast-paced, yet kind of groovy. Like it had that almost like Pantera-ish groove to it, which was cool. I wouldn't say like the same genre by any means, but like, you know what I mean when I say a Pantera groove. And if you enjoyed this album, definitely check out In Flames and Soilwork, like I mentioned. And the first album was not bad. It's just a little different. Tales of Sadness, which I think is the worst name for an album. It's just Tales of Sadness. It's like so emo, but
it's funny. You've been talking about this band this whole time, and some of the things that you've said immediately give me references to songs. Like you kept saying Italian band, and I kept thinking Bruce Dickinson's "I'm in a band with an Italian drummer." You said something about right now Tales of Sadness, and the first thing I thought of was Sea of Madness from Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
And then there was something else you said, and I'm like, this is just crazy how certain things you said throughout this entire segment, it reminded me of songs from different bands. So it's kind of weird, but that's the way my mind works. My wife will say something, and my kids will tell you actually, they'll say something to me, and it's a lyric from a song, and I will start singing that song, and it's just like, you are so weird, Daddy. But too bad. That's the way I am. All right, cool. Yeah, I got to check that out, because I'm pretty sure the things that you're going to talk about, well, 2 to 3 bands that you're going to talk about, I've no clue who they are, so I'm going to definitely take a listen to it on my way to work in the morning or on the way home, like I always do. But that's cool. I will definitely check it out. So my first band that I'm going to pick today, I'm going to go ahead and go with one that you said you may have heard, but you didn't really catch. And that is Denner Sherman with Satan's Tomb. It was an EP that came out in 2015, and it was released on Metal Blade Records, and it was recorded all over the place, really. It was recorded in Copenhagen, Denmark. It was recorded in Encinitas, California, and Denver, Colorado. So many of you out there will know who Michael Denner and Hank Sherman are. They are the guitar players from the original Merciful Fate, and throughout the years, many of you may or may not know the story. So if you're kind of new to metal and Merciful Fate and that kind of music, let me give you a quick overview. Merciful Fate, 1982, metal band from Denmark, big influence on Metallica. They released 2 original albums, and then they broke up when King Diamond, the lead singer, wanted to do his own thing, and he had basically a falling out with Hank Sherman. Their falling out lasted, was it 1999? Or no, 1992? Lasted about 5-6 years or so. They got back together. They released a few more albums throughout the 90s, and then they kind of broke up. And then they've been back and forth together over the years. But anyway, the bottom line is that Hank Sherman and King Diamond had this really weird relationship. Michael Denner and King Diamond had this really weird relationship. Michael Denner actually went with King Diamond to the King Diamond band. But now, the latest Merciful Fate does not include Michael Denner, which is kind of weird because Denner and Sherman have been working together doing the Satan's Tomb thing. So that's kind of a weird dynamic of what's going on right now. I don't know where the problem lies, if it's between Michael and King or Michael and Hank or what. But anyway, this was the debut EP of Denner Sherman. Satan's Tomb came out in 2015. I think I said that already. Essentially, this is like listening to Merciful Fate if they would have thrown King Diamond out and gotten a new singer, or if King Diamond would have left and they got a new singer. Sort of like how Judas Priest got a new singer with with Ripper Owens, and how Iron Maiden got a new singer with Blaze Bayley. It works, but at the same time, it almost feels like they're copying their own thing, and I like it, and at the same time, it's kind of weird to me. So I'll put it this way: the album is a cornucopia of different metal styles. You know, it has some thrash, it has melodic death metal, it has straight heavy metal. It has all these different things, you know, all thrown into one 4-song EP. But like I said, in reality, it's just a bastard child of Merciful Fate. Even the singer, whose name is Sean Peck, uses a falsetto from time to time, but his voice is kind of naturally deeper than King Diamond's. So it really, when he goes to the falsetto, he can't get as high as King Diamond. So it's just kind of weird, almost like he's trying too hard. So in that regards, he suffers the same fate as Ripper Owens and Blaze Bayley as singers who followed these really great bands only to come up a little short. That being said, the songs on this EP are really, really good. I really like the song Satan's Tomb. I like War Witch. They've got some really cool aspects to them. The only thing is that since you know who it is, since you know it's Hank Sherman, since you know it's Michael Denner, you almost are expecting King Diamond to kind of walk in and take over the vocals somewhere in the middle of the song. I mean, the drummer is even Snowy Shaw, who played with King Diamond. So there's so many connections there. So it's unfortunate in that regards that it's almost like a Merciful Fate clone, but at the same time, it does stand alone. It does sound really good. The songs are very good, and I think you should go out there and give it a chance. They actually did release a full-length EP like a year later, so I may look into reviewing that at another point. But this, as good as it is, there's a little bit about it that says, this is Merciful Fate's like little bastard son.
Well, I'll definitely check that out. I mean, I'm a big fan of Merciful Fate. It took a long time for me to get into them, but I've really grown to like them a lot. So I'll definitely check that one out. I wasn't even aware that the album existed.
Because you like Merciful Fate now, mm-hmm. and you didn't like the falsetto type vocals, this actually, I think you would probably like a little bit more because of the fact that the vocals don't go as high, mm-hmm. and it's not like as in your face as King Diamond in his solo stuff.
Gotcha.
And like I said, when King Diamond does the low growl stuff, it almost like he's forcing himself to go that low in the register, where this guy actually has a naturally deeper tone.
Gotcha.
So there's and the one thing I don't get about these, like this is the same thing that happened to Blaze, not so much with Ripper, but Blaze. Like, I don't know if it's the vocal style that they have when they go into the studio, that they record very dry or something. But that's the feeling I get. Like, Blaze Bayley's vocals always seemed like they were a little dry. Like he didn't really like extend his notes. Like when someone like rings out a note, he never really did that. He was kind of just like cut and dry with the words to me. And this Sean Peck is a little similar to that. It's just very, I'm singing the words. I'm not singing the words or anything like that. He's just singing the words.
He wasn't on Broadway.
No, he wasn't on Broadway. But you know what I mean. Like,
yeah, I know what you mean.
It's like a good singers will let a syllable or a word ring out in their tone, and some of them are just like they just cut it off, and these seem like they get cut off.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's a lot of vocalists out there that are very good, but then there's very few that are just great, and that there is a difference. When you hear like Iron Maiden with Blaze, and then you hear it with Bruce Dickinson, and there's just something magical about the way he sings. So,
yeah, absolutely.
All right, so my second pick for this one is a band I've mentioned before, but I think a lot of people still have not really heard of them, and it's one that I definitely think you should check out, and that's Beast in Black. And I picked their first album, Berserker. They're from Helsinki, Finland, but they have members from all over the world, including the lead singer is from Greece. So there's a lot of variety in their band, and they bring in a lot of different perceptions, I guess. So in a similar vein to Dave Mustaine, Anton Cavanan was thrown out of Battle Beast, a band that he was an original member of, and there's kind of conflicting information. There's some that says like he left the band, and then but basically it boils down to they had some pretty big disagreements, and they asked him to leave. So he decided to form his own band under the pretense of being even better than his previous band, and kind of bringing in more melodic elements and some solos and stuff like that were kind of left out. So there is a similar sound, but I do feel a bit like this. There's a bit more to Beast in Black. And the singer, Yanis Papadopoulos, he has an incredible high range, extremely clear, clean vocals, but he also can add a rasp to his vocals, kind of giving it more of an edge. And then he, in songs like on this album, there's a track called Zod the Immortal. He does a straight up growl, and it's fantastic. And he's just got amazing vocal ability. The album is primarily power metal, but it's got some arena rock elements and some heavy synth. And like I said, there's growling, there's some other aspects to it. So it's not like a death metal album or by any means, but he's like he explores his vocal range, I would say. Much of the lyrical content is based on dark fantasy. Kind of more like there's a book called Berserk that they based a lot of it on, and it's more of like a, you've seen fantasy movies like The Hobbit, but I would say like darker aspects of that kind of stuff. So the songs, I would say, like I said, are a bit more comprehensive. There's really great solos. I would say they're more unique and memorable than the stuff that I've heard off of Battle Beast. And to me, the highlights would be Beast in Black, the first track, Blind and Frozen, and Zod the Immortal, which I mentioned earlier. The biggest highlight to me was Blind and Frozen, which I was really surprised because like the first track, Beast in Black, was a lot heavier, and this was a bit more synthy, but you can hear him ringing out, like you kind of mentioned, like some vocalists will allow a note to just ring out, and in the first note that you hear off of this track is very much in the vein of like Rob Halford, where he just belts out this high-pitched, just perfectly in tune note, and it just, he's got that vibrato on it, and it's awesome. So one other thing is that Yanis has these vocals that sometimes he can sound very feminine, and then in the next note he'll sound extremely masculine and edgy, like in his voice, and he just switches on a dime, and it's really incredible. For that aspect, it's worth checking out just to hear this guy's vocal ability. If you enjoyed this album, the band has released a second album, From Hell with Love, which I really enjoy as well. And then they have a new album coming out this year. They've already released the first single, Moonlight Rendezvous, and it's got a really cool video. It's very Blade Runner-esque. So if you've seen Blade Runner, you kind of know it's in the same vein. And if you want to check out Battle Beast, the band that Anton Cavanan came from, their third album would be in the most similar vein as this band. It was his last with the band, so it has some similar elements.
That's cool. I like Beast in Black. They when the first time you turned me on to them, I thought I was listening to a female sing, because you sent me, you didn't even send me Beast in Black, you sent me over something from Giannis, and he was doing the Frozen song.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the hell? And I'm watching the video, and I'm like, that's coming out of him. And so his voice is amazing.
It really is.
He's got an incredible voice, and it does, span the gamut in the range. I mean, but yeah, there are times where he sounds very, female-ish, and other times where he comes out and he growls it together. So it's a pretty cool range that he's got, and it's definitely some really cool stuff that they play. It's definitely, and for me, I like the power metal stuff that they do. So it's really cool.
Yeah, and I really like the new track they released too. So definitely check that one out.
Yeah, I got to listen to more of them. That's for sure. I do enjoy them a lot. All right, so I was looking at my notes and seeing that this Denner Sherman thing that I said before, it was kind of I was trying to put a positive spin on it, and there was a lot of negativity about it, and I was not trying to make it seem like it was so negative, but for me, it is what it is. I think everyone should have their own opinion on it, and they should listen to it. But I'm going to bring something out now that I think is pretty cool. So there's going to be a lot of positivity on this one. And then the last one I'm going to do is going to have a lot of positive stuff. This next album I'm going to talk about is the Dublin Death Patrol and their debut CD or album or whatever you want to call it, DDP for Life. And I saw that and I'm like, why are they talking about Diamond Dallas Page? But then I realized, oh, it's Dublin Death Patrol. And then I'm like, why is it Dublin? And then I realized there's a Dublin city outside of San Francisco that's called Dublin, California. So that's where they're from, or some of them at least. Anyway, so if you've just noticed what I'm mentioning, this is a Bay Area band, a San Francisco band. These are guys that are from the Bay Area thrash scene. And if anyone has heard about this band before, they know who's in the band. Chuck Billy is basically the mastermind behind this. Chuck Billy of Testament fame. Chuck Billy and Steve Souza are the two vocalists for this band. The band consists of the following people, and there's a lot. Phil Demmel from Machine Head Violence fame, Greg Bustamante, and Andy Billy, Chuck's brother. All three of them play guitars on the album. Willie Lang from Laz Rocket, Eddie Billy, Chuck's brother, and John Souza, Steve's brother, are all on bass. Danny Cunningham and John Hartsnick, and someone named Troy Lucetta, which many people might know from Tesla, and they're all on drums. So I don't know where they get all these people on stage from time to time. They have had 11 people at one point performing at one time. So they're not all on stage at the same time. I'm just kind of kidding. They do have a lot of people from time to time. They're kind of like Spastic Children was with Metallica. Every time they would come back home, they would play these little weird, one-off shows. And this is what this band is. And they actually were able to put together some original music along with some covers. It's a really cool album. They briefly toured upon this release, but they mostly stick around to the Bay Area, San Francisco, play local gigs, and whoever's in town that night, they try to get them all together and to get as many people from the original album together as possible. This album's got some really, really, really good guitar work on it. It's got a ton of cool riffs. It's got a ton of great lead guitar work on it. I mean, it's hard to really describe because these guitar players are not, other than Phil Demmel, really none of them basically made it. They're all kind of local, but they're good. I mean, there's always musicians that don't make it that are really good, and all these guys are really good. The album, I mean, if you like thrash metal, this is not even that hard a thrash album. So much like, for instance, if anyone knows, and I'll probably mention them another time, the band Hatriot, which is also with Steve Souza and his sons. That one is like pure thrash, beginning to end, and it's kind of more modernish thrash. Where this one's kind of like got the mix of thrash with some straightforward metal, little bit of deathiness from time to time because of Chuck Billy and the way he likes to do his vocals. So there's that element to it. So this has got a lot of eclecticness to it, especially with the original songs. They're very melodic. They're very well done. But for me, the highlights on this album are the covers. It's weird to say.
I would agree. I've heard the album.
Yeah. They do have really good song in Trail of the Executioner, which is towards the end of the album. I like that. Then they also have, I think, was it Rip, Rest in Peace is one of the songs that, I think that's the song that starts the album. So there's some good stuff. But the covers are really what do it for me on this one. They do a killer version of Iron Fist from Motorhead. They do a really cool version of Thin Lizzy's Cold Sweat. And then, to me, the best song on the album as far as the covers are concerned is UFO's Lights Out. They do an amazing version of that song. And what I really like about it is that they change the lyrics around a little bit. So instead of saying lights out in London, they say lights out in Dublin, which I think that's pretty cool that they were able to get that put in there like that. So that to me is the highlight of the album. But Trail of the Executioner is one of the better original songs on the album. And what I like about that one is you see the title, it says Trail of the Executioner. If you listen to the song and just the music part of it, and you see the title, it kind of gives you a vibe, almost westernish, and almost like riding a horse, and someone who's like racing across the Badlands on a horse, really, really fast, and it's got that gallop to it. The song has the gallop, and it's just it's a very just the guitar work and the drum work. It gives you that sense. It gives you a picture in your mind that that I just described. I don't know. You got to hear it to really understand what I'm talking about. But it's a really cool song, and the guitar solos that trade on and off, from the middle to the end of the song, really, really cool. So there's a lot of good guitar work on the song as well. This is not Testament. This is not Exodus, but there's enough of those little elements sprinkled throughout that keeps their fans listening to the songs and still enjoy it for something completely different. So, and another cool thing about this album is that it ends with some Central Pomo Indian songs and chants. If anyone knows, Chuck Billy is Native American. He's part of the Central Pomo Indian tribe. That's his mother's side. That's his dad's side. Excuse me. His mother's was Mexican. So he has a lot of Native American aspects to his songwriting and to his style. So he was able to put that on this album. And I thought that was a pretty cool touch. Being able to do something like that so it doesn't interfere with like his main band in Testament.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I remember liking the second half of the album more than the first half, which was mostly the covers, and that Trail of the Executioner song is pretty good. I always thought it was funny, like they have a track called DDP for Life, then Sid Vicious, and it was like, oh, is this a wrestling album?
Yeah, right. I mean, you would think so right off the bat, but it's not.
All right, so that brings me to my third and final pick of the night, and that is Nosferatu by a band called Bloodbound. This was their first album in 2005. This was one of two albums with the singer Urban Breed. They've gone through three singers total, but he's definitely my favorite of the three. While it is a power metal album, you can definitely hear some influences from the new wave of British heavy metal, especially Iron Maiden, especially in the song structure and solos. So it is kind of influenced by that time period, and I think that what really drew me to this band. The title song, Nosferatu, I would say has some pretty significant song structure similarities to Hallowed Be Thy Name. It's not the same song. I wouldn't put it quite on the same level by any means, but at the same time, if you listen to it, I think you will kind of notice that. Urban Breed has been with a couple other bands and sings kind of in this power metal style, but he has a rasp to his voice that is a little bit different than the typical power metal singer, and I just really enjoyed his vocals. The choruses are really catchy, and there's some like really very singable melodies, which I think is another thing they have in common with Iron Maiden. Like I said, one of only two non-consecutive albums with the singer. Basically, they had him on the first album, then they went to a singer named Christian Andren, and then went back to Urban Breed because he had left the band. He wanted to work on a different project, and then they asked him to come back for the third album. And then by that point, I think they had finally found a singer that meshed with them a little bit better, and went on from there. And what's interesting is Christian Andren was the replacement singer in this band for Urban Breed, and then they were both in the band Tad Morose, where Urban Breed was the second singer, the replacement for Christian Andren. So it's funny that they kind of each replaced each other in two different bands. So as a note on the third album, even though I'm not really talking about that one, it's called Tabula Rasa, and it has, again, the same singer. It incorporates some elements of metalcore into this kind of power metal, new wave of British heavy metal sound, which is really interesting. And it's the only album in the catalog that I noticed this in. So this would be one to check out as well. But again, focusing more on this album, the highlights would be Into the Dark, which is the first track, Nosferatu, Metal Monster, and For the King, and On the Battlefield. And I had a hard time finding a track I would even consider to be like the weakest track. I really enjoyed the whole album. The biggest highlight for the album is Nosferatu, the title track. I really, really love this song, and it shows a really dynamic range, a lot of ability for the singer, and it's a catchy and memorable song. I just kind of keep singing it in my head because I've heard this album a couple years ago. It kind of came back into my attention, and in this last month, I've kind of been listening to it a lot. So it's kind of the catalyst of what made me think of this topic, because this is a band, Bloodbound, that has gone through a lot of changes, and when that happens, sometimes fans don't stick around, or it doesn't kind of stick. And they've had the same singer, the current guy, for years now, but in that early career, like it's sometimes hard to grab onto a band when they've gone through lots of changes with singers and etc. Those key members of the band. But if you like this album, definitely check out Tabula Rasa, like I said, and then you'll probably enjoy the entire catalog. The second album is really good with Christian Andren. He has a very different voice than either guy. So there's some variety there, but as a whole, I would say their catalog is really good.
Cool. I got to check that out. I definitely want to listen to stuff because just the way you're describing it makes me. I'm interested because I know what you like and I know what you listen to. So I definitely want to see what it is that you're suggesting the rest of us listen to. All right. Okay. My last pick. Some of you out there might know it, like just kind of, probably more of you may know this than Dublin Death Patrol, but this is a band that actually had a little bit of a career here in the States. This is a band called Saigon Kick. Many of you may know Saigon Kick. They had a I don't know if it was gold or platinum. I think it was a gold single for Love Is on the Way from their second album. But this is what I'm going to talk about is their first album, their debut. Came out in February of 1991. It's a self-titled album. It's released on Third Stone Atlantic Records. Third Stone was a subsidiary of Atlantic Records. It was started by actor Michael Douglas, and he actually saw the band along with Jason Flom, who was with Atlantic Records, and they saw this band. They said, "We need to sign these guys," and so. They called up Michael Wagner, who's of Dokken fame and some other bands from the 80s metal. And they said, "Hey, can you do this band?" And he said, "Yeah." And they flew him out to California and they made this album, Saigon Kick, the debut album. This album is amazing to me. This is their debut album, like I said, and I think it's probably one of the best albums to come out in 1991. It definitely was the beginning of the slew of albums that came out in 1991 that were just amazing. I mean, think about the albums that came out in 91. The Black Album from Metallica, Use Your Illusions from Guns N' Roses, Slave to the Grind from Skid Row, For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge from Van Halen. There was Nevermind from Nirvana, Pearl Jam came out in 1990. What was the other one? From Soundgarden, Bad Motorfinger. I mean, there was just a slew of albums that came out in 1991. I mean, if you look back on it, 30 years ago was an amazing year for music. And yes, Nirvana's album kind of changed the landscape for everybody after it came out, but man, what an amazing year that was. And this album was the beginning of it. And me living in Miami at the time, this band had a lot of buzz. And I had heard about, I started going to a music business school on Miami Beach, and I would see people wearing, what was the shirt called? FYSMD, I think was the logo on the back of the shirt, and it said Saigon Kick on the front on this little look like army font, that they put on the boxes, and it would say FYSMD, and I'm like, what the hell's FYSMD? And then I figured it out. It was "Fuck you, suck my dick."
Oh my God.
And that was like their motto. And, so everybody's wearing these shirts that say FYSMD on it. What the hell is that? And they actually had a song called "Fuck You, Suck My Dick" that they would play at the end of their end of their shows. Now, mind you, they were a local band, so they can get away with that. But as a national act, if I'm not mistaken, when I saw them open or saw them do their own headline show after they came back from doing their opening act tour, I guess you put it that way. They played their local show in Miami. They played that song, but the next time I saw them when they were an opener, they did not play that song. So it is, and they could pack a house back in Miami. I mean, I think I went to see them in a place that held 2,000 people, and I think there was probably 3,000 people in that place. It was insane how many people were in that concert venue. It was the Button South in Hollandale, And man, there was a lot. I mean, I had never seen it that packed. You could barely move that night, but Saigon Kick rocked the house. I mean, to be in a nice small place like that, to see a band that just made it was pretty cool. But anyway, going back to this album to me, I can't really pick the one band that they sound like, but this is an album where I would say, for lack of a better comparison, the Beatles meet Def Leppard. And the reason I picked Def Leppard is because I know Def Leppard does a really good job with their background vocals. And the Beatles obviously do a good job with their harmony vocals. And that's what this album and that's what this group does so well. The harmony vocals between Matt Kramer, the vocalist, and Jason Bieler, the guitar player, they have matching voices. And then just to put that all together to do the background vocals that they do on this album is outstanding. I mean, the vocals on this album soar. It is so cool what they do. And the riffs on this album are insanely good. I mean, there's just the guitar sound is so cool that it pops off the record. I mean, you put that CD in, or you put I don't think they had a record at the time, but you put that CD in, and it just the guitars just pop off of it. Michael Wagner did a great job on this. Very raw, very in your face, and with the eclecticness of all these songs. You have New World, which is the first track on the album, and it's kind of got this tribalism. I kind of compared it a little bit to the first song on the new Iron Maiden album, Senjutsu, which is the song Senjutsu. It's got that tribalistic kind of sound to it. New World is very similar in that regards, but it's just so cool. It's so heavy. And then the next song, is called What You Say, and they've got those Beatlesque harmonies, and it's a very poppy kind of song. And then you have the song after it called What Do You Do, which is just full of attitude because, the people are making fun of the singer because he has long hair and he's just trying to get back at him and stuff like that. And the songs just go up and down in terms of attitude and poppiness and grunginess, even though grunge didn't really technically exist in the mainstream yet. It's just this album is so eclectic. Then they even have a song that has a kazoo solo in it, and that song is called My Life, and it's an amazing song even with the kazoo solo. I really, really suggest that people go out there and either stream it or pick it up somewhere. I just mentioned a bunch of songs on this album, but probably my favorite song, I got two of them, is got to be What Do You Do, because of all the attitude on it. And then this song called Ugly it's a really harsh song, and the song comes across as ugly, even though it's a good song, but you get that vibe on it, and I really, really enjoy that song a lot. It's unfortunate that the band really they put together a second album, which was just as good, and then they kind of fell apart because Jason Bieler kind of got a big head, and then Matt and him didn't get along anymore, and Jason said, well, screw you, I can do the vocals without you because I sound just like you, and there was, a ton of ego.
He does, but I like Matt's tone better. Because
Matt has a lower tone, so it vibes really well with Jason's voice. Jason's voice is too high pitched, and as much as I like Jason's voice, they work really well together. But Jason by itself, double, does not sound the same.
Yeah, it was disappointing because you brought this band to my attention, and I really like that first album. The second album I like it not as much. I feel like this was an album that was way ahead of its time to come out in 1991 and have the tracks that it does. Like it blows my mind that this band didn't get bigger than they did.
Absolutely, and part of that had to do with whatever promotion that they did, because I couldn't tell what they were doing around the country because I lived in Miami, but I knew that they were getting airplay in Miami, and I know that people were loving them in Miami, but around the country, I don't know what they were doing. I knew they came back from a quote-unquote triumphant first tour, but to me, it would have been more triumphant if they had actually gotten MTV airplay. And I don't think any of these songs, I mean, a song like Colors or Susie could have probably gotten some good, video airplay if they had put a video out for them. But I don't think they did. So I think that's where they fell off. Even a song like, I think they had a video for What You Say, and it didn't garner that much, which was surprising. The next album, Because of Love Is on the Way, took off. But Ego's gotten away, and then their third album, which was decent, it just didn't have the same thing, and their fourth album just kept going down, and unfortunately they fell apart after a while.
Yeah, the third album, Water, it's not bad, but it has some weird stuff on it.
It's very experimental. The song Water itself is weird.
It's weird, and then they have a track called Fields of Rape, which is...
I actually like that song.
It's a good track, but it's like...
It's a weird title.
It's a weird title.
It's not going to get you any favors, that's for sure. But it's a good song.
And when your singles are covers, that's never a good sign.
Yes, that they did a cover of Space Oddity, which is a really good cover.
It is.
It's too much like the original, and they actually did a song. So talking about the Beatles, they did a cover of Dear Prudence from the Beatles, and it's amazing. It came out on the Japanese version of this album. It is absolutely stunning the way that their vocals blended, and they were able to replicate what the Beatles did. But it only came out in Japan. I think it was later released as a B-side somewhere, and it is just hard to get. Really cool song, or really cool version of the song, but again, it's unfortunate. I mean, they've reunited over the years from time to time. They're not the same band. And actually, the bass player had left the band at one point, and the bass player Chris McClernand joined the band. He was a bass player from a Kiss tribute band, and he joined. And then Phil Varone was the drummer, and Phil Varone went on to play in Skid Row, if I'm not mistaken, for a long time. And
he was there after Sebastian Bach left the band.
Yeah, and he's an interesting character. And if anyone knows Phil Verone's story, he has a movie/documentary about himself, and that's really weird. If to say the least. I have not watched it. A lot of people have told me about it. And it's almost like I don't want to watch it.
Gotcha. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, it talks about his drug abuse, and he went into porn for a while, and then he was, I think, naked several times throughout the documentary, full-fledged. I mean, he's apparently he's equivalent to Tommy Lee in Below the Belt. So that tells you everything you need to know right there.
Interesting. So from what I understand, they are kind of touring on and off with Matt Kramer and Jason Bieler and some of the other guys. So I don't know. It would be if they were to tour here, I would definitely want to go see them.
I would love to see them. I mean, that's great if they're together again. I mean, like I said, they reunited a few times over the years. The last time that I saw them, as far as a reunion was concerned, was I think the last Monsters of Rock cruise. They were doing the show that happens before the cruise takes off. That's on land. I think they did that show before the cruise left, and I hadn't heard anything since then. But I do know that Jason released that really weird oddly named album. Jason, or Bieler and whatever. He looks like a.
Oh yeah, the one I talked about actually.
Yeah, you mentioned it on the show a long time ago.
It was Jason Bieler and the Baron von Bielski Orchestra.
Exactly. Yeah. So he's
it was a pretty good album. Like, I actually like that. It wasn't Saigon Kick.
No,
it was still pretty cool.
Yeah. It is very cool. But that's the last thing I know that he did, and he had some association with, was his name Jason McMasters from Dangerous Toys. So there's something there. But if they're back together, if he's back together with Matt Kramer, that'd be awesome, because I love Saigon Kick, and I would love for them to come here. I mean, I would be at that show in a heartbeat.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, there's our 6 albums from bands you haven't heard of or heard from or heard in general, and albums that we think you should listen to from them.
All right, so one more time, our 6 albums that we chose today were Saigon Kick with their debut album, Saigon Kick, DDP for Life by Dublin Death Patrol, Denner Sherman with Satan's Tomb, Rain Time with Flies and Lies, Beast in Black with their debut album, Berserker, and Bloodbound with their debut album, Nosferatu.
Awesome. I definitely think we need to give those another listen to. I will definitely be listening to yours. All right, so that brings us to our Big Four for tonight. And tonight we're doing the Big Four heavy metal bassists. We did the Big Four heavy metal drummers way back when. So this time we're doing bassists, and I know you have a different slew of bass players than I do, but I have a feeling we might have one, maybe two that cross over.
We will see.
I went last time. The last time we did a Big Four, I went first, so it's your turn to go first.
Okay. My number 4 is Steve Digiorgio, or as you call him, Steve DiGregorio or Steve DiGiorno. He is one of my favorite bass players. He's played in Death, Testament, Control Denied, Iced Earth, Sadist, Obituary, and about 20 other bands. He's one of those guys that's very prolific and well-loved in the industry. But the reason I have him at number 4 rather than a higher slot is while he is an amazing player and he has his own style, etc., he never quite has that impact on a band that some of these other players do because he doesn't have a very long tenure with them. The exception now kind of being Testament, where he's played with them for several albums and several years. So he's kind of found a home in that way. But he even when he was with Death, he played lots of albums, but he was in and out in the band. He was good friends with them, and so anytime they needed a bass player, he would drop in. But it was just like he's just one of those guys that just loves to play and loves to play a lot of variety. He even plays jazz and some other stuff too. So amazing player and definitely worth listening to a lot of his stuff. My number 3 is Linus Klausenitzer. He's a name you might not know, but he is the bassist or former bassist for Obscura, Alkaloid, and the current bassist for a band called Obsidius. So Obsidius was some of the guys that were in Obscura. They left to form their own project, and it's kind of in the same vein of what they were doing before, but clean vocals instead of death growls, and it's all on good terms. They're all still friends, just doing some different stuff. The reason I picked him is when I saw him live, I saw him, it was around 2012, 2014, somewhere between then, and they were in Houston, and I was blown away by his playing. And then he was on 2 of Obscura's albums following that. And so when we saw him, a friend and I went to the show, it was a little shocking because the bass player that they had before, I'm trying to remember his name, Joran Paul Thesseling, I think his name. So he had left the band, and anytime that happens when there's a band that's so tight and has such a sound as Obscura, it's a little scary to see a new member. And when this guy started playing, I was just blown away, amazed. I've watched a lot of his stuff. He does tutorials. His style of playing is so impressive. He brings this kind of jazzy element into it, and it just blows my mind. So he's one that has stuck with me, and I've seen him play with the band live, and just could not stop watching the way he was playing, which was awesome. My number 2 is Geezer Butler from Black Sabbath. in the grand scheme of things, it's hard not to pick a guy like Geezer because he has had such an impact on the genre. Those first 6 albums from Black Sabbath have some of the most amazing riffs, but there's an aspect to the music that is even further beyond that. Is the rhythm section is so amazing. He and Bill Ward worked so well together. They played off of everything that Tony Iommi wrote, and there was a magical chemistry with that band, and his playing has influenced so many other musicians that it's hard not to pick somebody like him. I've even picked up his solo albums because I liked his playing so much, and then he had a unique kind of perspective where he was, writing the lyrics of the songs and his style his playing mixing with that kind of songwriting process, I always thought was really interesting. So he's definitely my number 2. And my number 1 is from my, it's hard to say because sometimes they're my favorite band. Sometimes, and I think they've grown more as my favorite band over time because, they're still around versus like say Death. And that's Steve Harris from Iron Maiden. Steve, has such a recognizable sound. He is an amazing musician. His songwriting ability is still great to this day. We've talked about Senjutsu, and the tracks that he wrote on there were amazing. But he created that Iron Maiden gallop, and that's something that is very impactful and influential on their sound. And he is, when it comes down to it, he is Iron Maiden. All the other guys that are in the band, they are Iron Maiden as well. But there is something about the sound of the band that is so intrinsic to who he is as a musician that he has made this sound. And for that, them being, my favorite band, I have to pick Steve Harris.
Hey, you can't go wrong picking Steve Harris, let me tell you. There's just no way to go wrong picking Steve Harris. So, with that being said, we do have 2 people that cross over.
Okay.
And so, very surprised, but at the same time, not surprised at all. So, my number 4 bass player or heavy metal bassist is Joey DeMeo from Manowar. And Joey DeMeo, he is, it's hard to say. So if somebody is really good at something, right, and you go up to them and say, hey, listen, what do you have to do to be this good, right? And that person tells you everything you're supposed to do, and he gives you the framework of how to do it, right? And you can, he ends it with, you could be just like me. Is that guy an arrogant asshole? Is he egotistical? Because the reason I bring up that kind of scenario is that Joey has this thing about sonics, and he won't play a certain venue if the sonics don't sound right to him. He's created this PA system that is supposed to be sonically perfect, but he will only use it in certain places because if there's a balcony, he doesn't want the balcony to be sold because people are going to sit up there and they're not going to be able to hear it the correct way. So there's an inborn arrogance, but he's not really wanting to be arrogant about it because it's just, that's his choice. So it's really weird, but he is amazing. And when I first heard him, first album from Manowar, Battle Hymns, he did William's Tale on piccolo bass. And he did it about 100 times faster than the way it's supposed to be done. It is amazing how fast he plays it. It's amazing how precise he plays it. It is an absolutely amazing version of that piece of classical music. And I heard that for the first time, and I was absolutely mind blown. And that just added to my joy of being a bass player, although I never became a very accomplished bass player. But that was one of those things I was like, oh my God, this is so awesome. And so he takes my number 4. And the reason I said everything else I said about him is because there is a little bit of a air of arrogance to him, and how he feels about Man-O-War, that you almost think the guy is an asshole, but part of it is also very, very genuine. And it's just a really weird, what I call it, dichotomy between the two, that it's hard to really grasp which one is more prevalent, the asshole or the nice, genuine guy. So, but that's Joey DeMeo, number 4 from Man-O-War. Number 3 for me is your number 4, Steve DiGiorno. Steve DiGiorno. I make so much fun of his name. Steve Digiorgio or Digiorgio. Really, really great bass player. I mean, plays a fretless bass, and he can just play so many different styles, but he kind of wants his personal thing to play is this extreme heavy metal, and that's he's just absolutely awesome, and it's almost like, what is it, effortless. And
it really is.
Exactly.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
And if anybody out there has been following the tales of Megadeth this past year, there's a good chance that someone named Steve Digiorgio will be playing bass on a new Megadeth album, but that's just a rumor. So, number 2 for me is a bass player that many people are familiar with, even more so now, but they were familiar with him before he was in the band that he's in now. Rob Trujillo from Metallica. I think he's an absolutely amazing bass player. I thought he was an absolutely amazing bass player before he was in Metallica. I knew of him when he was in Suicidal Tendencies, and I thought that that was his gig. That was him. He fit that band so well. But he proved that he's more than just that band. By going out there and playing with Black Label Society, he went out there and played with Ozzy. So he is very, very good. He's amazing. He brings back the finger playing to Metallica that was not there during the Jason Newsted years. And I mean, he may or may not have limited himself by being in Metallica, but at the same time, he still gets to show off a little bit when he's out there on stage with them.
I think one thing interesting about Rob, too, is that he's kind of broken into that that shell that James and Lars have kind of put up, where they are the guys, because he's actually, respected in a different way. And I hate to say that Jason wasn't respected, but he really wasn't. He had a rough go of it in that band.
Yeah, he did.
But I think he still treasures that time, etc. And regardless, but Rob has kind of broken into it to where they listen to his ideas, and he is kind of more of a member of the band, which is really good. He's brought some harmony to those 4 guys.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest thing is that they learned through the therapy sessions that everyone got to see on Some Kind of Monster that they needed to grieve for Cliff's death, and they needed to accept the fact that whoever's playing bass for them, they can't treat them that way.
Yeah.
And there's so many different circumstantial things that went on with James and Jason, and the reason why Jason left. No need to get into them here, but the fact that Rob is in there, yeah, he has definitely been able to break that, but he still knows his role. He's been able to break through to James and to Lars, but he still knows his role, and he still kind of sits back a little bit sometimes. But he does bring an element of cohesion to the band, and that's a really cool thing. All right, and my number 1 heavy metal bass player or heavy metal bassist is the same as your number one, Steve Harris from Iron Maiden. It's hard to put together any lists of bass players or any list of bass players and not include Steve Harris as a number one or number two. Geezer in your list absolutely belongs in there. I just felt that these other three were more, I mean, not more important, but better bass players. Although Geezer's absolutely amazing. Steve, on the other hand, when you think about everything he's accomplished, he created Iron Maiden. It was his idea from scratch. He has been the driving force behind that band for over 40 years. Almost 50. We're talking about 40. It started in 75. That was his idea. So we're going on, 46 years, right?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I mean, you think about that. Iron Maiden started in 1975. And it's not the same Iron Maiden that we know now, obviously. But, 5 years later, they have a record contract and, they're moving along and they become what they've become today. But Steve has always been the number one driving force behind it. They call him the boss for a reason. It is Steve. This last album, he's the one who held on to the master files until it was time to get everything out there in the open for the Senjutsu album. He held on to him for 2 years, or almost 2 years. So it tells you a lot. For the most part, Rod Smallwood listens to Steve. Look at it that way. If Steve doesn't go along with it, Steve's not doing it. Rod's not. Rod can sit there and try and do whatever he wants, but Steve's like, no is it. So, and then, so you think about just that part of it as a creator, a creative outlet. Then he's the bass player who wrote 90% of the songs at first. And all those songs that he wrote and all the songs that he still writes and the epics that he comes up with. I mean, those last three songs in Senjutsu average 10 minutes or more each. And he had
and they're good.
Yeah, and he had another long song earlier in the album. So he's probably got 4 songs on there that add up to 40 minutes worth of music. And it's just amazing that this continues to come out of him at the prolific rate that it does. Mm-hmm. And that's the songwriting aspect. So everyone forgets about the songwriting. Everyone forgets about that he's the leader of the band. Everyone forgets about the fact that he is the man who created this whole dynasty, if you would look at it that way. And then you listen to the records and you just absolutely know who is playing and where that sound is coming from. I mean, it's amazing. He says he only plays with 2 fingers. I swear to God, he plays with like 20. Just the way that thing sounds. But he says he plucks with only 2 fingers. And I believe it's his middle finger and his ring finger. I could be wrong. If he does play with a third one, it's his index finger. But I mean, just in the way it sounds and the way it snaps and the way it plucks the strings and how it all just blends together. That's Iron Maiden. That's Steve Harris. I mean, to me, he's by far and away one of the greatest bass players to ever live.
Absolutely.
Well, peeps, those are our big 4 heavy metal bassists for tonight, and that brings us to the end of today's episode. So let me remind you again, you can find us and all of our previous episodes on your favorite podcast platform, so don't forget to click the subscribe button.
That's right, and if you enjoyed what you heard today, be sure to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, or send us an email to debatingmetal@gmail.com. If you use Spotify, be sure to check out our playlist from our greatest hits episodes as well. Make sure to tune into the next episode when we spark up another exciting metal debate. On behalf of Kenneth and myself, stay safe, and remember, always turn it up to 11.
See ya.